Hello, I'm Brian, and this is how I was able to go better in life. Sometimes as a man, we need to make decisions and make it work. This is my breakup point, when my life make a 180 turn. The air was crisp that morning, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and freshly brewed coffee. I was running late, as usual, my backpack slung over one shoulder and my mind already racing through the day's tasks. The campus cafe was my sanctuary, the one place where I could grab a moment of peace before diving into the chaos of architecture studio. That's where I saw her for the first time. Gaby. She was behind the counter, her dark curls bouncing as she laughed at something a customer had said. Her smile was electric, lighting up the entire room. I stood there, frozen, as she turned to me. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. I stammered out my order, black coffee, no sugar, and she handed it to me with a playful grin. "You look like you need this," she said, her eyes twinkling. I managed a weak smile in return, but inside, my heart was pounding. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything.
Thank you for watching Gaby's cheating stories. Please subscribe. It just take 1 second. Thank you.
I really like her, to be honest, and you know, when we like something we go after it. That's how my father taught me. So, I started visiting the cafe every day, sometimes twice a day, just to see her. Gaby had this way of making everyone feel special, but I liked to think I was different. She remembered my name, my order, and even the little details I mentioned in passing. One evening, after the cafe had closed, I found myself lingering outside, pretending to check my phone. She noticed me and waved me over. "You're here late," she said, locking the door behind her. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" I laughed nervously, and before I knew it, we were walking across campus together, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her family, her mom, who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, and her younger brother, who looked up to her. She spoke with such passion, her hands gesturing wildly as she described her dreams of traveling the world. "I want to see everything," she said, her eyes shining. "I don't want to be stuck in one place forever." I listened, captivated, and when it was my turn to talk, I found myself opening up in ways I never had before. I told her about the pressure I felt from my parents, the weight of their expectations, and how architecture was my escape. "You're lucky," she said softly. "You have a purpose. I'm still trying to figure mine out." That night, as I walked home, I couldn't stop thinking about her. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met, vibrant, unpredictable, and utterly captivating. I was falling for her, and there was no turning back. 3 years later, I proposed to her on the same campus where we'd met. It was a crisp autumn day, just like the one when I first saw her. I'd spent weeks planning it, down to the smallest detail. I took her to the cafe, now renovated but still holding the same charm, and got down on one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she said yes. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, filled with laughter, music, and the people we loved most. I remember standing at the altar, my heart pounding as she walked toward me, her dress shimmering in the sunlight. She looked like a dream, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. But even then, there were cracks beneath the surface. Her flirtatious nature, her need for attention, I saw it, but I chose to ignore it. I loved her, and I believed that love would be enough to overcome anything. After the wedding, we moved into a small house on the outskirts of the city. I was working long hours, trying to establish myself as an architect, while Gaby took on the role of a homemaker. At first, it felt like we were building a life together. She'd cook dinner, and we'd eat together, talking about our days. But as the months went by, I noticed her growing restless. She started working a few shifts at a local cafe, but it wasn't enough to fill the void. "I feel like I'm just waiting for you to come home," she said one night, her voice tinged with frustration. I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I knew something was missing. It started small, almost imperceptible. Gaby had always been a free spirit, her laughter infectious and her energy magnetic. But over time, I began to notice little things that, on their own, seemed harmless, but together, they painted a picture that made me uneasy. That's when we as men need to think sometimes this kind of red flags and how we just let them pass. But hey, we can make choices right away if it's needed. Right? One evening, we were sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, when a commercial came on featuring a famous actor. Gaby leaned forward, her eyes glued to the screen. "God, he's so hot," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. I chuckled, trying to play it off. "Yeah, I guess he's alright," I said, though her comment lingered in my mind longer than I cared to admit. A few days later, we were at a coffee shop, and she picked up a magazine from the rack. "Look at this guy," she said, pointing to a photo of a professional athlete. "He's not just good looking, he's built. Why don't you work out like that?" Her tone was playful, but the words stung. "I'm a little busy designing buildings, Gaby," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. She rolled her eyes. "I'm just saying, it wouldn't kill you to hit the gym once in a while. Imagine if we do this type of comments to our wife. Not good, I can bet you." The comments became more frequent. She'd mention how a celebrity dressed, how they carried themselves, or how successful they were. "Did you see his new movie?" she'd ask, her eyes sparkling. "He's so talented. And rich. I mean, can you imagine living like that?" I'd nod, forcing a smile, but inside, I felt a growing sense of inadequacy. Was I not enough for her? Did she regret choosing me? One night, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find her scrolling through social media. "Look at this," she said, showing me a photo of a musician she followed. "He's so gorgeous. And look at his house, it's insane." I sighed, setting my bag down. "Gaby, I'm tired. Can we not do this right now?" She looked at me, her expression hardening. "Do what?" "I'm just having fun. Why do you always have to be so serious?" I sat down next to her, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's just, you're always talking about these guys. It makes me feel like I'm not measuring up." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Oh, come on, Brian. It's not that deep. I'm allowed to admire people, aren't I?" I wanted to believe her, to brush it off as harmless, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Gaby was asleep beside me, her breathing soft and steady, but I felt a growing distance between us. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Was I overreacting? Or was there something deeper going on? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: the little things were starting to add up, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could ignore them. I didn't like how I felt in that moment when we talked about it. I felt like if I was with another woman who I felt in love with. But well, the days blurred together, each one a relentless cycle of work, stress, and exhaustion. My career was taking off. I was leading major projects, meeting tight deadlines, and earning the respect of my peers. But the cost was steep. I'd come home late, my mind still racing with blueprints and calculations, only to find Gaby already dressed to go out. "You're working late again?" she'd ask, her voice tinged with disappointment. I'd nod, too tired to explain. "I have a deadline, Gaby. You know how it is." She'd sigh, grabbing her purse. "Yeah, I know. Work always comes first, right?" Her words stung, but I didn't have the energy to argue. One Friday night, I came home to an empty house. The silence was deafening. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried not to worry. She was probably out with her friends, blowing off steam. But as the hours passed, my anxiety grew. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, willing it to ring. When she finally walked in at 3 a.m., her hair disheveled and her makeup smudged, I felt a surge of anger and relief. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice tight. She shrugged, kicking off her heels. "Out. You wouldn't understand." I stood up, my frustration boiling over. "I wouldn't understand? Gaby, I've been worried sick. You didn't answer your phone. You didn't text. What was I supposed to think?" She turned to me, her eyes flashing. "Think whatever you want, Brian. It's not like you care anyway." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "How can you say that?" "Of course I care. I'm working my ass off for us, for our future." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Our future? What future? You're never here. You're always too busy with your precious work." I took a step closer, my voice trembling. "And what about you, Gaby? You're out every night, partying with your friends, hanging out with athletes and socialites. What am I supposed to think?" She crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't need to go out. Did you ever think about that?" I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'm trying, Gaby. But I can't do it all. I can't be everywhere at once." She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "You don't get it, Brian. I'm lonely. I feel like I'm drowning, and you're too busy to notice." Her words cut deep, but I didn't know how to fix it. I reached out to her, but she pulled away. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Just don't." She walked past me, disappearing into the bedroom and slamming the door behind her. I stood there, alone in the dimly lit living room, feeling like the walls were closing in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our argument in my mind. Was she right? Had I been so focused on my career that I'd neglected her? Or was she using my absence as an excuse to escape our problems? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: we were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to pull us back together. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Gaby was already gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of her perfume. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, feeling more lost than ever. The woman I loved was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. Our arguments became more frequent. I'd come home exhausted, only to find her dressed up and ready to go out. "You're working too much," she'd say. "You don't care about us anymore." I tried to explain that I was doing it for us, for our future, but she didn't seem to care. One night, after a particularly heated argument, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, alone in the dark, wondering how we'd gotten to this point. I started to suspect that something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. The fight was inevitable. It had been brewing for weeks, maybe even months, like a storm gathering on the horizon. That night, it finally broke. "I'm going out," Gaby said, slipping on her heels. She looked stunning, her dress hugging her figure, her hair cascading in perfect waves. But all I felt was a sinking dread in the pit of my stomach. "Gaby, please," I said, my voice strained. "Stay home tonight. We need to talk. We need to figure this out." She turned to me, her eyes cold. "Figure what out, Brian? The fact that you're never here? The fact that I'm tired of waiting for you to notice me?" I stepped closer, my hands trembling. "I'm trying, Gaby. I'm working for us. For our future." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Our future? What future? You're married to your job, Brian. Not to me." Her words cut deep, but I didn't back down. "And what about you? You're out every night, partying with your friends, hanging out with athletes and socialites. What am I supposed to think?" Her expression hardened. "Think whatever you want. I'm done explaining myself to you." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I reached out, grabbing her arm. "Gaby, don't do this. Don't walk out on me." She yanked her arm away, her eyes blazing. "Let me go, Brian. I'm not your prisoner." And then she was gone, the door slamming shut behind her. I stood there, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I didn't know what to do, where to go, how to fix this. So I did the one thing I never thought I'd do. I hacked into her phone. It wasn't hard. She'd left her password written on a sticky note in her drawer, a careless mistake that felt like a cruel twist of fate. My hands shook as I unlocked it, my stomach churning with dread. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to know. But I couldn't stop myself. The messages were the first thing I saw. Flirty texts, suggestive photos, and then the videos. My heart stopped. There she was, laughing, smiling, wrapped in the arms of a man I recognized instantly, a professional NFL player, someone she'd mentioned in passing, someone I'd never thought twice about. Until now. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My vision blurred, my chest tightening as I scrolled through the evidence of her betrayal. Each message, each photo, each video was a knife to my heart. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall, to tear the house apart. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my world was crumbling around me. The hours passed in a haze. I didn't know what to do, who to call, how to process what I'd seen. I felt numb, hollow, like a shell of the man I used to be. When I finally heard the key turn in the lock, I didn't look up. I couldn't. Gaby walked in, her heels clicking against the floor. She stopped when she saw me, her expression shifting from surprise to defiance. "What are you doing up?" she asked, her voice casual, as if nothing was wrong. I looked up at her, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "Who is he, Gaby?" My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything I was feeling. She froze, her mask slipping for just a moment before she recovered. "What are you talking about?" I held up her phone, my hand trembling. "Don't lie to me." I saw everything. Her face went pale, but she didn't back down. "You went through my phone? Are you serious, Brian?" I stood up, my anger boiling over. "Don't turn this around on me. You're the one who..." My voice broke, and I had to stop, swallowing the lump in my throat. "How could you do this to me? To us?" She crossed her arms, her expression cold. "You weren't here, Brian. You were never here. What did you expect? Her words hit me like a slap. I felt like I was drowning, like I couldn't breathe. I loved you, I said, my voice breaking. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me? She didn't answer. She just stood there, her eyes hard, her silence more painful than any words she could have said. I felt something inside me shatter, something I didn't know could be broken. The woman I loved, the woman I'd built my life around, was gone. And in her place was a stranger, someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't want to know. I turned away, unable to look at her anymore. Get out, I said, my voice barely audible. Just get out. She didn't argue. She didn't say a word. She just grabbed her things and walked out, leaving me alone in the silence. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and finally let the tears come. They burned my cheeks, hot and relentless, as I clutched her phone in my hand. I felt like I was breaking apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the pain. The betrayal. The emptiness. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I think this was the most painful time of my life. I can't forget it. The morning after I discovered Gaby's betrayal, the house felt like a tomb. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards as I paced the living room. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, pain, disbelief, but beneath it all was a deep, aching sadness. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my life around, had shattered everything we had. And now, I had to face her. When Gaby finally walked through the door, she looked tired, her makeup smudged and her hair tangled. She froze when she saw me, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing up?" she asked, her voice cautious. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I thought I knew. Finally, I held up her phone, the screen still displaying the damning messages. "Who is he, Gaby?" My voice was low, trembling with barely contained rage. She hesitated for a moment, her mask slipping, but then she straightened her shoulders and met my gaze. "You went through my phone?" she snapped, her tone defensive. "That's a violation of my privacy, Brian." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Privacy? You're really going to play that card right now? After everything I just saw?" I took a step closer, my hands clenched into fists. "How long, Gaby? How long has this been going on?" She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I saw the messages, Gaby. The photos. The videos. Don't insult me by lying to my face." For a moment, she looked like she might break, her lower lip trembling. But then her eyes flashed with defiance. "You want the truth, Brian? Fine. You weren't here. You were never here. You were too busy with your work, your projects, your precious career. What did you expect me to do? Sit at home and wait for you like some obedient little wife?" Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her shift the blame. "So this is my fault?" I shot back, my voice shaking. "I was working for us, Gaby. For our future. And you threw it all away for some guy who doesn't even know your last name." She laughed, a bitter, mocking sound. "Oh, please. Don't act like you're some saint, Brian. You've been checked out of this relationship for months. My friends were right, you don't deserve me. You never did." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my anger flare, but beneath it was a crushing sense of loss. Your friends? I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. You mean the same friends who encouraged you to cheat on me? The same friends who probably cheered you on while you destroyed everything we had? She didn't answer. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her expression defiant. I felt something inside me snap. You know what, Gaby? You're right. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve someone who could do something like this. Someone who could betray me, lie to me, and then act like it's my fault. Her eyes widened, but she didn't back down. You don't get it, do you? She said, her voice rising. I was lonely, Brian. I was drowning, and you were too busy to notice. You didn't care about me. You didn't care about us. All you cared about was your work. I shook my head, my heart breaking all over again. That's not true, Gaby. I loved you. I still love you. But you threw it all away. And for what? A few nights of attention from some guy who doesn't give a damn about you? She flinched, but her expression remained hard. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough, I said, my voice trembling. I know that you betrayed me. I know that you lied to me. And I know that I can't trust you anymore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, suffocating. Finally, I took a deep breath and said the words I'd been dreading. We're done, Gaby. I can't do this anymore. She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. You're leaving me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my heart breaking with every word. I have to. I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect me. Who doesn't respect us. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. For a moment, I almost reached out to her. Almost. But then I remembered the messages. The photos. The videos. And I knew there was no going back. I turned away, unable to look at her anymore. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight, I said, my voice hollow. I'll come by tomorrow to get my things. She didn't respond. She just stood there, silent and still, as I walked out the door. And as I stepped into the cold night air, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. It was over. We were over. And there was no turning back. I filed for divorce and moved to a new city. The pain was unbearable at first, but I threw myself into my work. My dedication paid off, and I was promoted to a senior position at my firm. Months later, I started dating again. I met a woman who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could give her. Meanwhile, Gaby's life spiraled. She lost the stability I provided and struggled to make ends meet. I heard through mutual friends that she regretted everything, but by then, it was too late. I had moved on, and I was finally happy.
Thank you for watching Gaby's cheating stories. Please subscribe. It just take 1 second. Thank you.